Appreciate you both. Flip them sheets.
I'm focused, man.
Welcome, ladies. Work one time for me. That's right. What a start to the podcast. All right. So, yeah. Well, if you have been keeping up on Google Classroom, I, again, put out that response, to the free response question. We'll have another one of those next podcast. So on Thursday, I'll give you a free response question. You can work on it and try to answer it over the weekend. And then I'll put up the response and talk about the response next Tuesday. So that'll be kind of the process that we go through with all of that stuff. Right now, that would be, not the research-based one. So this is the 25-minute one. So you're going to get a bunch of terms that you can apply to a situation or a prompt or whatever. But on the other side of that, you need to know that the 15-minute question is going to be more like a can you design an experiment type of question. So here's this scenario. And now I want you to make the independent and dependent variable and tell me what kind of, random sample you would use of the population to make the experiment. So we're going to hit that a little bit harder in the coming weeks before we get into crunch time, So be expecting one more practice FRQ like we just did with Jasper, the comedian from New York City. And then kind of expect maybe a research-based question next go around. So next Thursday, I want you to go through, answer that question. Working. Hello. Welcome. Here we go. All right. It's got to be better now. I kind of got a stripped down version of the podcast. I didn't set everything up because I didn't think I needed everything, but apparently I do, because the sound doesn't quite work without everything that I was doing. All right. Let's go through personality. Boom. So here we are, back on our personality stuff here. So just to finish off, this is personality part 3. So the trait perspective on personality, and it's exactly what you think it is. It's traits. So you're being very descriptive about somebody's personality. So a trait is a relatively stable, enduring predisposition to consistently behave in a certain way. And a trait theorist would pretty much focus on identifying, describing, and measuring individual differences in behavioral predispositions. So really just nailing down different descriptive methods of saying, oh, this person is like that. So we have surface traits, which are attributes that can easily be inferred from observable behavior. And then source traits, the most fundamental dimensions of personality, the broad, basic traits that are hypothesized to be universal and relatively few in number. The first guy that we study who goes over trait theory is this guy named Gordon Allport. And he discovers 4,000 words in the English dictionary, basically says, oh, these are traits, 4,000 of them. So let's look at what we got going on here. So Allport said we have cardinal traits, central traits, and secondary traits. Cardinal traits, they dominate your personality, okay? Central traits, main trait that form your personality. And then the secondary traits, variable traits, which differ depending on the current circumstance or the environment that you're in right now. So secondary traits are going to kind of change depending where you are. Cardinal traits dominate everything. And then the central trait, main traits that form your personality. Think about like, again, the Parthenon or something like that, and the pillars that are, holding you up. We're talking about those types of traits. So this guy, Raymond Cattell, he comes up with a nice little, furthers the trait theory along, and he reduces Allport's list of 4,000 terms to 171 characteristics by eliminating ones that kind of overlap each other, the ones that are redundant or uncommon that just weren't used usually. So he collected data on a large sample of people. They were rated on each of the 171 terms. Then he used a statistical technique called factor analysis to identify the traits that were most closely related to one another. Then he got it down to 16. So he goes from 4,000 to 171 and then to 16. And he comes up with this thing called the 16 Personality Factor Questionnaire. And it's a pretty good personality test. So he believed that these 16 personality factors represent the essential source traits of human personality. If you look at this image that I have up here, which should be right there. He kind of goes in between two things for each 16 traits. So let's just look at trait number 9, trusting. On the other side of it is suspicious. And then it's almost like, where do you fall in between those two, polar opposites, right? And then there's, number 7, timid. And then on the opposite side of that is venturesome. So where do you fall there? And then number 16, relaxed, intense, undisciplined, and controlled for number 15. He believed that personality could be described in terms of 16 source traits or basic personality factors. And it's a dimension thing. It's in between. It's where do you fall between these two particular things. Then we have Hans Eysenck, so German-born British psychologist. He comes up with the 3 dimensions of personality. So introversion, extroversion, neuroticism, and emotional stability, and then pretty much psychoticism. Introversion, extroversion is exactly what you think it is. Either you're, high on the dimension of introversion, you might be quiet, solitary, reserved, and a person high on the extroversion scale would be outgoing, sociable, enjoy new experiences, and all that kind of stuff, stimulating environments. So you could fall in between those two dimensions, right? So somewhere on that scale. And if you took the personality test that I assigned, then you really understand that you could be, scored, introversion, extroversion, right? And you could be 51% into the extroversion part, and they're going to mark you as an E instead of an I. But you're really close to both. So you kind of have to understand that. Neuroticism and emotional stability. Neuroticism refers to a person's predisposition to become emotionally upset, while the stability factor, which is the opposite side of neuroticism, reflects a person's predisposition to be emotionally even. So kind of calm, cool, collected, right? Ice in the veins type deal for emotional stability. And neuroticism is reactive and emotional and unable to check those emotions. You probably know people on both sides of the scale, right? So I believe that by combining these two dimensions, people can be classified into 4 basic types: introverted neurotic, introverted stable, introverted or extroverted neurotic, and extroverted stable. And then there was one other dimension called psychoticism, which you kind of understand what that is. A person high on this trait is antisocial, cold, hostile, and unconcerned about others. A person who is low on psychoticism is warm and caring towards others. This is where I usually spend some time talking about serial killers. Because they're usually considered very high on the psychoticism scale. But we don't have crazy amounts of time to do that right now. All right. So more trait theory stuff. Many trait theorists felt that Cattell's trait model was too complex, and that his 16 personality factors could be reduced to a smaller, more basic set of traits. And those traits happen to be this thing called ocean, right? The 5-factor model of personality, the big 5. We have openness to experience. So down to earth, imaginative, conventional. It's kind of like going in between these two things: conventional and then creative, and then prefer routine and then prefer variety. You're kind of going in between those things right there. So that's openness to experience. The next one, C, would be conscientiousness, and you can go between like lazy and hardworking and aimless and ambitious and quitting and persevering. And then we have E, which would be the extroversion, which you kind of already understand. And then A would be agreeableness, right? So kind of going between suspicious and trusting and ruthless and soft-hearted and that kind of stuff. And then finally neuroticism, calm versus worrying and all that kind of stuff. So you get scored pretty much on these 5 things. And I remember them by ocean. So openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. They're huge. I've seen that on the AP exam 1 million times. So make sure you know what that is. So the 5-factor model of personality, the big 5, the building blocks of personality. That's what kind of gets boiled down to. So evaluating trait theory of personality, just kind of got to make sure that, they don't necessarily say why these traits develop or anything like that. It's more or less like, these are the traits. We're just going to tell you what they are. We're going to tell you what we see, what we've observed in you, and these are your traits. It's not necessarily this thing where nobody tells you where it comes from. They're just describing. They fail to address other important personality issues, such as the basic motives that drive human personality, the role of the unconscious mental processes. So they kind of just leave some stuff out. But again, super descriptive. Huge thing right here. This puts everybody that we've actually studied in one place. It would be smart for you to study this before the exam. It goes through the psychoanalytic people, so Sigmund Freud, and then the Neo-Freudians, Carl Jung, Karen Horney, Alfred Adler, humanistic theorist, which would be Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow, and then social cognitive, Albert Bandura, which is reciprocal determinism. Please look that up and check it out. It's so interesting to see, and how, the interaction of behavioral, cognitive, and environmental factors dictate a whole lot for us. And if we want to change one of those things, we're going to have to change the other things. So it's kind of cool to check out. And then the trait theorist, which we just went over, Raymond Cattell, Hans Eysenck, And then the 5-factor model, it was 2 guys, Robert McRae and Paul Costa Jr. Assessing personality tests. We're talking about psychological tests. These are, you took one. You should feel pretty good about, what these things are. A projective test is something they used back in the day, still use a little bit today, but Rorschach inkblot test would be a projective test, right? What do you see here? I see 2 bears dancing with a red hat on. And then the next day, what do you see here? And it's the same picture. It's like, I see the fighter jet and it's diving into the water. I don't know where that came from, but, you could see different things on different days with the same picture. It just depends on you, right? So projective tests are kind of tough to deal with a little bit. Just like thematic apperception tests, they're super subjective. All right, graphology, pseudoscience that claims to assess personality through handwriting and doodles and drawing style. It's an interesting thing to look at, but again, it's a pseudoscience. Then we have self-report inventories, which are just what you took. You ended up taking the Myers-Briggs type indicator, and then, those were kind of divided up into 16 different sections according to letters of what you scored. The 16 personality factor questionnaire we've already talked about, designed by Raymond Cattell, generates a personality profile with ratings on 16 trait dimensions. And then the California Personality Inventory, CPI, self-report inventory that assesses personality characteristics in normal populations. And then a Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, the MMPI. It is for psychological disorders. So strengths of self-report inventory, standardization and use of established norms. So that's important. So, they're kind of given the same way. But then you have fake responses, right? Respond in a set way. People are not always accurate judges of their behavior. And I always say, ask your friend. If you were taking the personality test that I assigned to you, I would say, ask your friend, if this sounds right for you. Because sometimes you want to lie to yourself, right? Like, do you like to sit down with a good book? Society says, yes, I do, right? I really enjoy sitting down with a good book and, spending time reading it. And that could sway me to answer, you know what? I do like to sit down with a good book, but maybe I don't, right? Maybe you'll never catch me under the shade tree, just flipping through on the road. Now you might catch me doing that. The last definition we have is possible selves, the aspect of the self-concept that includes images of the self that you hope, fear, or expect to become in the future. I've said this a couple times to you guys. Imagine that you have 1 million possible selves, right, in the future. But you only have control over the present right now. And if you want to feel a sense of community, why don't you just take care of yourself in the future? All of them, right? Well, why can't we just do the things now to take care of ourselves in the future? That's a possible selves type of thought, Yeah, you got to go for it, right? I mean, you know what your potential could be, and you know that whenever you could possibly be doing things that are not helping you reach your potential. So, all right. Those are all my personalities up there. What was I? ENFJ. Caring, enthusiastic, idealistic, organized, diplomatic, responsible, skilled communicator, who value connections with people. Yeah, that's me. Master manipulator. I will manipulate you to get what I want. I didn't like reading that about myself, but you know what? It's true. All right. Well, that's part 3. We're all done with personality. It wasn't too bad. We're officially not learning anything new from now on. And so I'm going to hop on. I'm going to hop on old Instagram Live over here, put my little Thunderdome back up. And going to Instagram. Let go. Let's see what we got going on. All right, people, come on in. What up? What up? Oh, uh-oh. Corey. What's good, brother? Hunter. No, you can't join the live. You already joined the live. Jackie, it better be 6 feet apart. Madison. We'll wait for some people to come up so I can make an announcement to where, I'm officially. JG. Patrick. Hello, cool Jessica. Ah, my man. See, I'll let Jarman join the live. I'll phone him. K-Shell. I don't know how to do it from my end. No, it's not required. Really liked you to do it. Hey, Jarvis. Logan in the house.